Hello.
Hi, Bettina.
Hello.
That last meeting went
Okay.
incredibly well, didn't it? Our last meeting went so well.
I think, yeah, it was really nice to move forward with some of the actions, just feel like we're doing
Yes.
more than administration.
Yes.
But we have to do the administration too, I understand.
It all takes so long.
Yeah. We're waiting for 2 more.
Debbie and Felicita.
Yeah. And is Heather coming? Yeah, maybe Heather as well, because she's.
Oh, yes, Heather.
Mhm.
There we go. Looks like everybody's here. Let's do a roll call. Bettina?
Here.
Felicita?
Here.
Heather?
Here.
Amy?
Here.
Let's go. It looks like we have all the people that were supposed to be on this meeting, and we're going to review and edit the task force project plan that we were originally given. Trying to get to the right page. So in, does everybody have that 7.0 proposed project schedule?
Where would we have gotten that? Would it have been in an email or?
When we went to our, we had October 17 of 2023, we had a meeting, and part of that was all of that stuff. There it is, right there. Yep.
And so this document is posted on our task force website as well. Heather, I can put a link to the task force website for you if you'd like it.
Thanks. That'd be great.
You bet.
So it looks like our task force members have been seated. Our facilitator was hired. Our task force ground rules were created. Our kickoff meeting happened. Then our grant, we were going to examine grant processing practices, create uniform grant application steps, develop grant agreement language. So this was all supposed to happen November, January, February, March. If you see all the red stuff.
We didn't talk about any of those things though in our meetings. How would we have possibly done that?
No, we didn't. We
And
absolutely
it seems like
did not.
staff work.
We absolutely, this was something that was created by somebody else.
Oh, they
So
must
now
not
we're
know how
going to
complicated
update
it
it.
is. Okay, perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of changed the order of what things happened. We decided to gather more information before we went to each of those, you know, the grant processing practices. I think we're still in that process.
That makes sense.
And then all the other stuff under grants or contracting, we're still examining the client services contracting practices and examining the grant processing practices. And we're going to do that until March, right? Through March.
It seems like we're going to have to, because there's enough to dig into there, right?
Right. So I think we're, Amy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
So I think, can we update this and that examining grant processing practice is the first thing, and then the examine client services contracting practices for contracting. Both of those, for us, it looks like it's gone from November through March.
Okay. Yep, I can definitely make an update to that.
Yeah.
This is just a screenshot here, so this isn't editable, but I can open the Excel spreadsheet that has those draft dates in those and update them for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really what based on what we decided at the last meeting, where we had those, 3 sessions to inform ourselves.
Yep. Yeah, because it doesn't make sense to start building something before we have all the information.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
So if we push that.
Was Manuel Padilla coming
I've
to
got
you?
an announcement coming through on my side. There is someone from the public who's joining us.
It looks like Manuel Padilla does it.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So he was able to get in. So if I move that date over for the examining on both the contract and grants, does that mean all the rest of these items push out, or how does that, the domino effect, how does that happen? Because originally I put this together just as a draft, as a starting place, because this whole document, I think we need to go through the whole document here as this subcommittee. It's not just this schedule, it's the whole document. Yeah, I can zoom in. Here we go.
Yeah, I think what effectively we're changing, you had it more sequential into, the grants and contracting parallel, and I think what we're doing is we're doing it at the same time, but we're doing the investigation first, and then we'll come to the requirements and recommendations later.
So all of those second steps, all the contracting language and the grant application steps would need to go into April or later.
Okay. And does it make sense to keep them separate, or do you want them grouped? Grants and contracting, does it make sense that they're 2 separate things?
It doesn't to me, but how do you guys feel?
I think part of that will also come from our, from our input about the legal differences between grants and contracts. But I think we can run them parallel, and then maybe we have recommendations that are, separated out again if they are different for grants than they are for. So I feel comfortable just having one section.
I think I was misunderstanding. So basically, grants and contracting, it's a similar process we're doing for each. We're just doing, one is grants is the format, and the other one is contracts.
I would think what ends up being the way of contracting with the state is a contract or a grant legally.
Amy, is that the difference? It's just the vehicle, a contract versus a grant?
You know what, Debbie Dennis just joined us, and I would really like to defer to her on that question. Debbie, I don't mean to put you on the spot as soon as you come in, but we are potentially talking about collapsing the project schedule, grants and contracting, collapsing them into one instead of having them separate. And so could you maybe talk to us a little bit about why we might want to keep them separate? What's the difference between the two?
You're muted.
You're
so sorry. Yeah,
No worries.
I can speak to that. And I'm going to try to be concise. There's a few different reasons why, from the state perspective, it would be good to keep them separate until such time as we have enough congruence to put them back together. One of those is that we have very structured and robust rules and policies around procurements and contracting. So everybody has to follow the same process, and it's pretty detailed out. Grants, there is no central body of policy or rules. And so that's why you see the great deal of variance from that perspective. So I would say that that is the biggest reason that we may want to keep them separate until we all are on the same page about what's different on the state side.
So can you ask, so from your perspective,
Mhm.
is there a dollar amount? Is there, I mean, what says it's a grant versus a contract? What is the
Got it.
criteria?
Good question.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to close my door. There's a bunch of people out here talking. So hold on just
All right.
So come in the meeting, people. Okay. I'm in the office today and there's a lot of people here. From the state's perspective, a grant is when we have an amount of money to give to a firm to complete an objective. It's often citizen facing, right? So deliver a service, do a thing. A procurement is more like we need a service that's more government facing. Like we need an IT system. We need and I know it gets muddied up when it comes to client services, but it's a little bit more where we have where we're buying a service and we're paying for it based on deliverables.
So, but you can still, I mean, I've definitely received grants that have been procured though. Right? Because you said you procure it. I mean, there is.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, and DAS doesn't do a lot of grants,
Got it.
but sometimes
But the state agencies
will-
do.
yeah, sometimes
Got it.
the state agency will say, we have this amount of money available to to distribute through a grant process. And so if you're interested, submit your request for application or submit your application, and then we'll evaluate those and determine who's qualified to receive a grant, which seems, I'm sure, on the nonprofit side to be very similar to maybe an RFP process.
Yeah.
So so a grant doesn't require any proof of anything, any deliverables, anything. It's just here, abracadabra, I give you this money.
No.
No, not necessarily. Usually the source of who has provided those funds to the state to be able to distribute, usually that source has stipulated requirements. Like it might be the federal government, it might be the U.S. Department of Education, and so there would be requirements there.
It might be the state agency putting them on general funds, because
Yeah.
I've had that
True.
happen.
Yeah.
So what I guess when I was looking at this and we were first, and the way I was reading the first couple bullets on this, I was not thinking that granting and contracting was the difference, but that doing the research and then implementing results from the research was the step. But if you're saying contracting is pretty dialed in, but grants aren't, does it make more sense to flip this and look at contracting and see if there's ways to apply that to grants?
Perhaps.
I would think
Think,
that
oh, go ahead.
I'm seeing that both vehicles have ways to improve, and
I
it is
agree.
really in the upfront and in the reporting, because in where we are, we used to have contracts, and then the state agency decided that grants were much easier to get through. So they're effectively calling something a grant that looks exactly like the old contracts that I used to have.
Right.
It's just that the state requirements are very different, but the reporting is the same. How the money gets doled out is the same. It's actually very similar, but it was, I think, because the state agency wanted to get around some of the rules, which hasn't really addressed what we're trying to address here in terms of modernization. You know, it's just trying to get around a state hurdle in terms of compliance and procedures. And that wasn't really, that's not really what we talk about. Yeah.
Right. And it's still procuring for these services. It's just
Yeah.
not a formal RFP,
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing you.
Mhm.
Is that right, Debbie? It's just not a formal RFP process, but it's still a procurement though.
Well,
You're
I
evaluating
mean,
whether or not somebody should be funded. That whole future ready thing, that was a procurement. I'm sorry, it was, right? Not?
I would say like the Webster's definition of procuring, yes, absolutely it is. In the way the state rules and policies define procurement, it was not. And so I
Interesting.
think intellectually we're saying like, yeah, you're still going out and you're procuring
You're
someone to
competing for
do this
funding.
thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is very confusing. And it's confusing on our side as well when we try to have a conversation with someone who doesn't, isn't plugged into.
Well, and frankly, I'm just going to say many state agency staff don't understand this difference. I guarantee you 110%.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I work with them and they don't
Yeah.
understand it. And they're always talking about throwing the ball over to DAS and getting it back. And everybody's pointing a finger at somebody else for why there's a delay. So it's super confusing.
So
Mhm.
what's interesting to me about this is the GATA in Illinois, it doesn't make that split.
Mhm.
Procurement is procurement.
Mhm.
All grants become contracts.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's
Yeah.
how I think of it too. Like
Yeah.
we have a formal process by which we procure.
What
The
this
vehicle by
reminds
which
me
we
of,
procure is dependent on the threshold of how much money. Is it a
Mhm.
formal procurement like an RFP? Is it bids? Is it, yeah.
what this reminds me of is, remember when you used to put coins in play video games and it took you $5 before you even learned the game? That's what it makes me think of. And if we can just get a definition and combine them, grant/contracting, just like we're to update grants and contracting, but somehow get some
Mhm.
definitions that make sense.
And
Yeah,
I
I
think
think, oh, go ahead.
from the purpose of the bill, I think it's the making it easier for the people you purchase from. So that's where I'm thinking putting it together makes some sense, but then being aware that as we're making recommendations, we have to maybe have two recommendations, if it's a formal process for a contract or if it's a grant, because we're trying to remove barriers, or
Mhm.
modernize things. So maybe looking at it together would help us do that and really be open to whatever other states have done.
I think what you're saying is very accurate, that if we choose to combine the immediate result without a deeper dive would be the grant agreements would then become subject to a whole lot more process that they are not actually required to go
Right.
through right now. So we want to be a little careful.
Don't want to add more.
Yeah, I think what Bettina's saying is true. Like somehow can we meet in the middle, make the contracting side a little less cumbersome and have a little more structure around the grant side. Like, so.
But we actually like the loose grant side.
I know.
Yeah, we want contracting to move that direction. So I guess
as long as
I'm
your
worried.
nonprofit is getting the contracts, right?
I guess I'm a little worried that we are so far behind if this is what we were supposed to have been covered. So I'm just gonna make an observation. Our meetings are very process heavy and I find them to be exhausting. I appreciate that we have a ton of process people and that's great. And the group is mammoth, but how are we gonna eat this elephant if we're doing it so slowly that we're not even close to this timeline? Like how are we
have
gonna
to eat 2 elephants.
I'm
elephants.
thinking, you know,
Two
I
elephants.
oh, Felicita has put up her hand.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm also worried about the timeline, knowing that we have a deadline and a report to make, and I'm mindful of what Mercedes and the team have kind of designed around what January through May look like in terms of getting presentations and being able to do that work and have those critical conversations. To me, our biggest kind of roadblock is the fact that all of our meetings have to be like this. I am not
Yes.
allowed to email Mercedes and suggest something. So my hope is that with short sessions, some of these concerns can be addressed, and hopefully by end of March, like, we won't have this as a roadblock. It just, it doesn't allow for any, like, any speed, and it's just not getting us to where we need to be. And I'm all for following the rules, want to be clear, and I appreciate all the support that the state has provided and really clear guidance. And like, if I can't pick up the phone, like, I don't know how to get any of this done.
And
Thank
the
you.
other thing we could do is we could suggest at the next meeting, if we want to make that March, February, March meeting a bigger meeting, saying we really need to get through, as we're looking at the project plan now with some realistic feedback, where do we need to be, looking backwards, if we want to have good time in April, May to talk, and discuss options and evaluate options and get the data and stuff. We really probably might have to combine, the March and February meetings in terms of research and say, can we cram it and read, outside the
Yeah,
meeting?
maybe assign homework, right?
Yeah, because so if we think, that's, I think, as we're evaluating the project plan, that's what we might need to do, is saying we might need to do some research, by just getting the resources and reading them and then taking time at the next meeting to discuss some of the ideas or something like that.
The other thing we could talk about is, what if we had subgroups that handled particular parts of this, and people said, yes, that's my thing, I want to be there.
And then we can bring it back to the bigger group to get
Yes.
consensus, right? Marianne, that's the only way I thought we could eat this elephant too, is if we could pick off pieces and go deeper into them so that we can, it feels like bureaucracy's getting in the way of any kind of progress at all. And I get that we have to follow the rules too. It just feels like we've spent half our time talking about what the rules are. So. Oh no, did we lose Debbie? Oh no, there she is. Never mind.
Can I just add, I think the subgroup idea, I'm just mindful of, like, we have a design that's been, like, at least clear for this month and next month for the agencies to come prepared and questions to answer. I'm also mindful of, like, the time. Like, I don't know what the magic balance is of, like, the time of the committee members, the time of staff, like a subgroup, because of the rules, like, that would all have to be public, right? And staff would have to support, and there'd have to be a meeting agenda and lots of transparency. So I guess I feel that, and I'm mindful of capacity, and I know that we have a deadline, and I want an awesome report that is very clear so that our legislators know exactly what we want going into the 2025 session. Thank you.
So I know our agenda has been set for our next meeting, but maybe the next one, or even, we could say during our next meeting, we're interested in setting up subgroups. Who wants to be on cost recovery payment models? I want to be on that one. Who wants to be on living wages? Just so we can see where everybody's at.
I heard that there's worry that won't actually move us faster because it would take so much staff time because they have to do the same process with every one of those meetings. Is that true, Debbie? Amy?
I think if there weren't as many members with six or eight people in a group as opposed to 30 or 40, I think it would be faster.
I think the one common thread to every meeting is Miss Amy. So I think we would, I don't want to speak for Amy. I don't know her capacity to staff all of the different breakouts. But perhaps we could get a second, like someone to support Amy to do some of the meeting convening if we needed to do that. I don't think we need every agency represented in every breakout group. I think we could divide and conquer as agency people.
And I thought there had been another facilitator hired, and I don't know, we kind of talked about it in that first or second meeting, but I never heard any more about that.
Right. It would, the idea was to hire a facilitator who is doing more, Amy's not facilitating. Oh, let me say it reverse. Amy's doing scheduling, preparing documents, preparing agendas. And so what we had attempted to hire for was someone to actually convene and facilitate the conversations we're having. And
that's when Mercedes said, "I'll do it."
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We do have someone on standby if we need a second facilitator. We do have someone in our agency that could help with that. But that's different than all the behind the scenes things Amy is doing.
So I apologize. What are we trying to accomplish today?
I think we're trying to create a project plan that we can approve. I think what we've got in front of it is what Amy has prepared, but none of us had any input. So I think we're trying to create a project plan that we as a team can approve, and then I think we can work it. You know, so far we haven't worked the plan. We've just got ourselves set up. But we're trying to actually create a plan.
So Amy, can we see this proposed project schedule in an Excel sheet that we can edit?
Yeah, I have it here for you to see. It's just, it's not like I can just drag and move the bars. They have to manually be put in with dates here. So that's why when I asked you, so I moved this examine grant process practices, I moved that over. So now this is an accurate representation of that. So now we just need to sort of figure out the dominoes underneath of each one. Felicity, I see you have your hand up.
Sorry, a couple thoughts. One, like we outlined January through May, so I think we can just align those with the dates that we've arranged. Two, I'm just getting worried about this whole idea of subgroups, because I feel like we developed a plan and it's far from ideal in terms of like time and whatnot, but yeah, it's just the processing is getting to me.
So it's getting to me too, but I hear you saying that there's a plan for January through May. Is that what I heard, or March?
Through March. Because we have those agencies,
and that's
then we have
getting
the
all
agencies.
That's a bunch of presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, and at the agenda meetings, which we had ours last week, we talked about what are the questions we have that we need the agencies to prepare for. So then, so we went through for February, and I imagine next month's agendas meeting, we will be prepping for March. I imagine robust discussion at these meetings, where then I would think that from those meetings, hopefully would come maybe more questions, but also some answers and recommendations that we would start working on.
So it does seem like then, to your point, the examine grant processes and practices, that has to be aligned like you did, Amy. That looks great. But then everything else just could fall. Could those bottom red ones fall where the bottom green ones are? Does that make sense to you? It just feels like we're doing a parallel process, and if they're very different, I'm worried about that, but maybe that's how we do it. And one of the things that I worry about is if every state agency presents differently, I don't know how we're going to be able to keep track of this and codify the information in a way that we're able to wrap our arms around it. Because if somebody presents tomorrow and somebody else presents 2 months from now, I am not going to remember every detail of what that first person presented. So I want us to have a really solid plan for how we're capturing the information in a consistent way. Otherwise, we're comparing apples, pizza, bananas. We're going to be having to redo all these presentations. So whatever we do, great, but we have to document it in the same way, because I've done this many times before and not thought that through enough. And then you're just comparing pizzas and bananas and it doesn't mean anything.
So in the agenda setting meeting we had 8 agencies that we identified that were going to present tomorrow. And they had a set of uniform questions for each one. So in theory,
That's
we could set up
perfect.
the same kind of columns and say, yes, no, X, Y, whatever. And
I
then
love
have
that.
everybody's collated in one place. Do you do the 10%? Why is this different than this agency? And everybody
Yep.
can ask their questions in the chat, and we can take these 8 and see how they line up, and then see what further questions we have or what questions are answered by that. Even if
that.
it's answered for 5 of them, but not 8 of them.
Yeah.
And from what I see in this, we're aligning ourselves with what the bill says in terms of some of the tasks, because that's what the bill asks us to do, those recommendations. But there could be also, detail we do, or there could be more generic questions on, partnering. Because, one of my thoughts is that real partnering has a different feeling than what we currently do, where we just deliver under a grant. So do we want to do recommendations that are really in the weeds, or do we also want to do things that are more about what does partnership look like, the 3 to 5 year contracts and rolling forward and, reporting reporting schedules that are not monthly to get paid, but they might be quarterly and looking back. And so that, I'm not sure we make space for that, but we probably know more once we heard all those presentations on where we really see things come together or don't come together. Because for me, some of those lines are just so in the weeds, and I don't know if this is what we want to tell the legislator.
I think if I follow correctly, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it's about scheduling time on the tail end of the agenda to make sure okay, the committee has time to debrief and share initial draft ideas for recommendations. I also envision that when in our recommendations, there's here's the free low-hanging fruit. Here's what is going to take a year. Here's what's going to take 5 to 10 years. And I think that's going to be a critical way for us to talk about the work in a time where things are tight.
So Amy, can you put up the agenda for tomorrow so they can kind of see what the questions are and what the 8 agencies are?
You bet. I'm going to pull that up right now, just so that you know the questions are not included in the agenda, so I will have to pull that up separately, but I will pull up the agenda for you right now.
I think this'll you'll be able to see.
Okay. Here is the agenda for tomorrow. And the reason why I haven't distributed it yet is because I am waiting for all of the memos and presentations from each of these agencies. I've only heard from 2. I will say there were a few agencies who have the last minute, just in the last hour, have reached out to me and said they completely misunderstood the assignment, and I don't know what we're going to get from them tomorrow. I don't know if they have time for it or not. The first one is Oregon Youth Authority, and the second is Department of Education. So
That's disappointing.
It is disappointing. I don't know if what they've prepared. I just got a couple of frantic phone calls and I'm waiting to hear back from them. So
well, it'll be helpful for them to hear what the others say so that maybe they can turn it around and at least email it to the committee or something.
That's an option as well.
Yeah.
And I will post everything that the agency sent to me. I will post that on our website, so you can feel free to go back and review that at a later time. So would you like to see the questions that we sent to the agencies? Is that what you'd like to look at?
I'm okay
Yeah.
to wait. But
I think it's fine to wait. So how do you feel about aligning the red grants outcomes with the green contracting outcomes that were on that chart? Does that
I
sound
think
that makes a
I
lot of
think she
sense to
did
me.
that.
Yeah.
I-
It's not
yeah.
100% aligned. It's the sequence is
not,
different.
but yeah.
Okay.
It's similar, but not exactly. Yeah. Like if they were in the same
Okay.
order as well, I think that would help.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not exactly the same in each list. They're a little bit different, just as long as they're recognizing that. Okay. I will go through and adjust the dates and make sure that they exactly align. Do you want them the same links as well?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I can do that. I won't make you sit here and watch me do that. But I will make sure that that gets taken care of.
And then one of the things that gave me great relief was when we got Swetha shared something that had already been published. Even though it was a very short report, there were links in it to another 42 pages. So we can do a short little report with recommendations, and then we can link things that we think will help that process.
So Amy, on the end of the thing, which is really where, we have to pull things together, what's our deadline for the legislator? Because we don't want any tasks to overlap with that. In terms of we might have one around.
Let me just pull up the Senate bill so that I don't misspeak here. I just want to make sure that I have the right date for you.
That's a really good question, Bettina. Does it matter? We're reverse engineering to that point, right?
That's how I do a lot. When does it need to be done?
Okay. So it looks like our report is due no later than September 15th.
Okay.
Holy crow.
So that's, so we're doing it through the summer.
So I think our report, we should be reviewing it in August then.
Yeah, everything done by July.
Finalize final vote in September, because
so all our tasks have to be done by the end of July then,
I don't know how we can do this if we meet monthly.
And that's a question to the committee, isn't it? Yeah. Especially when
Because
summer's coming.
I don't see that being possible.
So then we have April, May, and June, July for all the work, isn't it? April through July is when we would do all the work.
So can I ask a clarifying question? If I look at the task force charter on page 1 of 6, it says that our committee charter authority and anticipated duration will stay active until December 31, 2024.
Is that so that we're active during the ledge session?
I don't know, but that it says that we're active until December 31st of 2024.
But if the bill says that we need to submit a report, I mean, we can be as active as we want. I think that the end goal is that report, a powerful report, right? That reflects what we've been hearing from our sector for years. So I don't think, the deadline doesn't change. Maybe we'll have some buffer time, which is great, as legislators write bills and maybe they want to talk to us and maybe we want to continue to explore things, but the deadline doesn't change. And I do think maybe I'm I'm a big believer that sometimes an idea is just an idea and it's not always the best idea. So I do think that maybe a subgroup that's working on the list of recommendations now, as
Ooh.
like we have these meetings,
Building it.
we're gonna talk for hours tomorrow, right, about tomorrow's theme. And so what are some of the major takeaways that someone can start working on? Um, and I don't know if this group will be meeting regularly throughout the year. I don't think they would because of the scope. And so we could just like switch capacity, if that makes sense.
I would just also say that, as Amy's highlighted here, it's kind of two different things. The Senate bill created the task, called for the creation of a task force. It gives us an assignment, and then it also has like a sunset date of when the task force closes. And so those two things just weren't the same in the legislation. That was probably intentional. Because we hand in our report at the end of September, we may get called upon to interact with the legislators who are trying to put together legislation, because we're going right into early 2025, going into the long legislative session. So maybe there was some intentionality between having the task force remain active.
That
So
makes
when I
sense.
look through this charter, I don't see where it says your report is due on September 15. What am I missing?
Scope under 2.0, it's right there under 2.0 project plan. No
I think
later
you're in the
than
wrong document, Mary Ann.
there's
Are you in the project plan or are you in the charter?
No, I'm actually in the charter. I'll
So
go
I
back.
think the project plan really identifies more of the details of the work that we're doing.
I see. Task force to report to the legislative assembly by September 15, 2024. Okay.
So I think if we reflect this in the project plan today, we can tell the whole group tomorrow what that urgency is, and then we can have the conversations about, potentially making time for additional meetings in April, May, June.
Yes.
Once we gather all the data. Because I think that's what I see as our role today, is just saying, we've looked at that project plan, we look at its feasibility, and then it goes back to the whole task force to say, we want to, work this amended project plan. But it is tight, very tight, especially if we haven't done any work on task force work in the last few months, just setting up work.
I realize something that's kind of unclear. Are we writing the report as a committee? I mean, we can't use Google Doc because of transparency and all that. And I'm thinking about efficiency and like, is this DAS's role to like start writing so we have something to respond to? This is my first governor's task force, so.
That's a really good question. Devil's in the details, huh? Debbie, how do you see it?
Well, this is my first task force as well. I know that Amy is always willing to help get, sort of some ink on paper so that any group she's working with has something to react to. The challenge will be, does she have the content? So we may need some content contributors, and then Amy can start compiling once we get to that point. However, Mercedes may have a different idea too. Maybe she has an idea of doing it. We haven't had that conversation.
Yeah, I'm mindful, and Mercedes is so smart, so I trust her judgment. Yeah, I mean, and tomorrow, I mean, it's going to be live, so we can maybe we could sort of practice of like Amy taking notes about what are the recommendations that she's hearing committee members bring up as we hear presentations from each of the departments. Um, yeah, thanks.
We could even have a jam board, where people put the key things that they hear that they want to pick up, and then we could sort them by topic.
I
I
think the
really
plan,
like that.
I think the plan in the agenda setting meeting was they were going to ask people to not use chat for other things and put all of their questions and all of their comments directly about the presentation by agency in the chat so that we could all see it and all have it captured.
What I like about the Jamboard idea is that it can get organized then, as opposed to just like a list of comments in the chat. But I mean, I think if there's a plan, let's go with the plan. I'm not on the agenda setting committee, so I think I missed quite a bit I feel like y'all know more than I know what's going on. And so the other thought that I had is there any reason we can't be doing some surveying or polling of membership in between meetings? Because maybe that could be a way we could move work forward as well. Like, I loved the idea of documenting, okay, so what are we hearing? So what are some recommendations from this section? And then maybe that goes out in a poll so that there's something that the committee can point to as documented, like this is what people said. Because kind of to your point, Marianne, and your point, Bettina, it's like, where do we document it so that it's somewhere? So maybe that could be a way, like each month after the meeting, we get a survey or we get a respond to.
Amy, do you guys use Doodle Poll at all?
We have used Doodle Poll, sure. We also have Survey Monkey, and
I was thinking Survey Monkey, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe even during the meeting, some of that could take place between members or for all the members to see. I don't know.
Well, I wish we could use Zoom because they have polls. We could do the polls right in the meeting.
And we can do that in Teams. They just have to be set up ahead of time. I just need to know what it is that you want to poll for.
And maybe we'll see what the session is tomorrow. We'll get people to take notes. We see what we get out of it. Do we have a lot of questions, and what do we all feel we do with it? And then we apply the same process next month.
Yeah. Like tomorrow could be the experiment one. I just think it'd be nice for staff to have something that's codified, something that is tangible, that says 90% of the members or 80% of the members agree with blah, Because when you're going before the legislature, I just feel like it feels so official. Like you need to be able to go back to the record.
I think that's a very good way to show, I love statistics, so I think that's a great idea.
Just to show, to demonstrate the engagement, because I think there are a lot of smart people. It's just such a big group.
And we could even do a starting one and an ending one and see, at the beginning, 20% thought this, at the end, 90% of them thought this.
And as we get to the recommendations, we could go back to what was our thinking early on, because that's the other part. When we make the final recommendations, we might want to go back to our early conversations, because there is so much. We're not going to make final recommendations in the first few meetings. They're just
right. Amy, can you think of anything else we need to cover today? Does anybody have any more questions?
I think the only question of what were we going to do with this tomorrow? Are we going to present it to the team as an update? Because I think we have to sign this project plan, don't we, Amy? There's a desire. to have a
We
project plan
do,
set.
Bettina.
Mhm.
And there is actually more work that needs to be done on this document that we really haven't touched on today. So we really need folks to go through each section, but especially when we get towards the end, there is a place for a communications and engagement management plan. And this subgroup really needs to focus on that and put some detail to that of what our external and internal communication needs will be for this work that we're doing. And then we can capture that in this little chart here, this graph. Capture some of those vehicles and things that we want to share out communication-wise. So I don't know if that's work, Marianne, that you would prefer that people take away and do on their own and bring back as homework, or if you want to get this subgroup together again and walk through that together. I'll leave that to you as the facilitator, but I do see Felicita has her hand up.
That was essentially my question, is how do we do this, making sure we follow the rules and are efficient and not give Amy 100 more things to do.
So can we, number one, the RJC, can we write Racial Justice Committee so that everybody will know what that is?
You bet.
So this group is editing the entire document, the entire project plan?
Yes, that was
Okay.
the goal.
I kind of support the idea of doing a little homework and coming back with our edits. Can we do that? Because I want us to use our time well, and I have such limited capacity for these meetings, and I want to do my homework and move the work along. So would that be okay with folks if we all kind of reviewed this and did our edits and then we come back together and discuss them?
That
And
makes
can we-
sense, and then we'll take it to the February meeting, so we'll sign it off at the February meeting, if that's still okay. Task force meeting.
And
So
we
we're-
could talk
so-
about the timeline though, and updates to the timeline in tomorrow's meeting, couldn't we?
If there's time, I know that our
Oh,
agenda is
okay.
pretty full tomorrow with
Okay.
all of the agency presentations. If everyone does present and we allow
Got
for
it.
questions, it's going to be kind of tight, but there might be some time at the end.
Well, then
At
it'll
the
be
end-
ready in February.
At the end, we have, I think we had 2 hours for the agencies, and then we have roll call, and then we have public comments. And then we have the January task force requests for agencies, but somewhere in there, we could also bring this up. Or we could put it on the agenda for February. And then I think we probably, after we look at all this, we should have another meeting in a month or so. Or however long you guys think you need.
To do the exercise of the communications exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our next meeting should be before the next task force meeting, just so that we can.
So if we did it in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Should we do it even before the agenda is being set, so we know if we need to add something to the agenda for the February meeting?
When is our February agenda meeting?
It's on February 8th, and the full task force meets on the 13th. So if this group would like to get back together, it would be earlier in that week of February 5th.
So we could do the 5th or the 6th, maybe?
My only time is 1 p.m. on Monday the 5th or 9 a.m. on Tuesday the 6th.
So 1 p.m. on the 5th works for me. Anybody else have their schedules they can look at?
It works for me as well.
So 1 p.m. February 5th on a Monday sounds like that'll work. And then we'll be ahead of the game.
Are we sending, like, would it be helpful to send this, like, some of our thoughts to Amy so that they can compile them? Again, like,
That's a good idea.
but I'm also I don't just want to like throw stuff on Amy. That's really mean.
I don't think we need an agenda setting in order to do this meeting. because then we would have to have 2 meetings. You'd have to do it a week before we're going to meet, to set an agenda to meet on the 5th.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think Felicity was asking, do we want to do our edits to the document? Do we want to send those to Amy before the 5th so that she can combine them, but she's trying not to assign Amy's work?
Are we
Yeah,
allowed to do that?
Yes, you are allowed to do it. Yeah, that would be fine. If you guys just want to use the track changes,
That's
when
what
you're
I was
making
thinking.
changes to the, use the track changes, and I could compile everything together. And then when we get together as this group, you can decide what to accept or what you would like to adjust as you can do it live.
Amy,
So
can
what
you
I
give
would-
us a deadline to get it to you, the edits, so
Sure.
that you have enough time?
Yeah, you bet. I will do that. If we are meeting on the February 5th, let's say I need it on January 30th.
Mm.
And I will send you an email.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You bet. I will update the chart, the proposed schedule. I will update it and I will repost it on the project webpage.
Mhm.
So that is updated, at least that piece is updated. And then I will follow up this meeting with an invitation to the February 5th meeting and the deadline for your edits, along with this document, so you don't have to go to the website.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
You bet.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I think we're good. Or I think we're done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
See you
Thanks,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.